Now, as we move into the final portion of the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 27, we recall that we concluded our last commentary with Jesus crying with a loud voice and having yielded up the ghost. In other Gospel accounts, we learn that as he cried with a loud voice, what he in fact cried was, "It is finished," indicating that the work that he and the Father had agreed upon and ordained to be done in him from the foundation of the world had indeed come to pass at this moment, at the moment that he met his physical death upon the cross, that he now had paid in full the sin debt for all who would come to him by faith. Now continuing in verse 51, "And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent." In verse 51, we see the symbolic division, the opening to all of mankind now, of that veil, of that curtain that hid the Holy of Holies, where only the high priest was allowed in the temple to come before God and to make a sin offering on behalf of his people. Now, at Jesus' death, at his sacrifice, he is now the last Passover. He is now the final sacrifice. There is now no more need to have a high priest make a sacrifice on behalf of other individuals. Now we have the blessing, we have God's grace upon us to come directly to him before his throne of grace to seek his mercy and his forgiveness. Verse 52, and this is one of the most telling verses in all four of the gospel accounts, because it shows how widespread this event actually is. It shows the length to which God went to make this event known not only locally, but abroad, as the account of this event would be retold. "And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city," and that is Jerusalem, "and appeared unto many." So here we not only have Jesus who dies on the cross, with certain events taking place, certain meteorological events taking place. We see the earthquake. We see the temple veil being torn in half. But after his resurrection, many other bodies that were in the graves arose and came into Jerusalem and were met by many others, people that they knew. This is an astounding event, an unprecedented event in all of history that is almost glossed over in Scripture, just two short little verses. Yet imagine if a loved one of yours arose from the grave, came back, and told you about the glory of Jesus from beyond the grave before returning to heaven. This was a glorious event beyond anything that happened before and beyond anything that will happen until the rapture of the church. Verse 54, "Now when the centurion," and that is a Roman centurion, "when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, Truly, this was the Son of God." Here are people that were not even Christians, or were not even at this time followers of Christ, because the term Christian had not been coined yet, but these people recognized that Jesus was indeed who he claimed to be, without even being his followers. Verse 55, "And many women were there, beholding afar off, which followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. And when the even was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea, named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. So this is Joseph of Arimathea. As we will learn, he is a wealthy man. As we saw before, Jesus makes his grave both with the wicked and the rich. Well, he was crucified between two thieves, one of whom repented and now has gone on to be with him in paradise. But he was crucified with two other legitimate criminals. That was the wicked. Now, his burial will take place among the rich, because Joseph of Arimathea is wealthy. Verse 58, he, that being Joseph of Arimathea, went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Having been mentioned before, it would appear to be that this other Mary is the Mary, the mother of James and Joseph. Now, because Jesus had reiterated that he would die and in 3 days he would rise again, that the temple of his body would be destroyed, and in 3 days the temple of his body would be rebuilt, and he explained that as being resurrected, there were those who believed that his followers would concoct some kind of scheme to simply remove his body and thereby make it appear as though he had somehow mystically, magically been whisked away into the wind. Well, if we recall what happened in verses 52 and 53, they would have been very busy because they would have been raising many people from the graves who were already dead. That would have been a lot of pre-planning because there's a lot of people who were known by other people in the city of Jerusalem at that time who arose from the dead and came back into the city to meet people that they knew. See, it wasn't just Jesus that resurrected at this time. So this becomes very significant. But we'll read what precautions were taken to try to avoid what they thought might be a kind of a charlatan act, a kind of sleight of hand act to make it appear as though Jesus were supernatural, when in fact many believed he still was not the Son of God. Now the next day that followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate. And notice how desperate they are to continue covering their tracks. When I was a young boy, my father gave me a very wise piece of advice. He said, if you tell a lie, you may get away with it for a while. But the problem with telling a lie is every time you tell the lie, you have to tell another lie to cover up the first lie. And every time you come back to the same story, you have to keep telling more and more lies until you can't keep track of the lies anymore. You're better off just to confess the truth at the beginning, accept whatever punishment may come from confessing your guilt for some improper action, and be done with it, because it's over then. What he was really teaching me was integrity. And that is what the Pharisees are lacking here. Integrity. They're continuing to try to kick dirt on top of all of their lies, to continue covering them up. And now they're trying to cover up another lie. They've already brought false witnesses. They've already schemed to have Jesus betrayed. They've already brought him before Pilate. They've already created insurrection among the crowd by some means to get them to cry for his crucifixion over a man who was guilty of burglary, murder, and sedition or insurrection. Isn't that interesting? They did the very thing to get Jesus crucified that the man standing next to Jesus was guilty of. One of the things he was guilty of. They did. They broke several of their own commandments in order to get Jesus there before Pilate's judgment seat in the first place. And now they're covering with even more lies. In verse 63, they're addressing Pilate saying, Sir, we remember that deceiver, speaking of Jesus, said, "While he was yet alive, after 3 days, I will rise again." Well, at least they understood that much. "Command, therefore, that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away, and say unto the people, He is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first." Oh, if they only knew how bad the last error was going to be and how long it was going to last. Pilate said unto them, "Ye have a watch. Go your way. Make it as sure as ye can." So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. So now everything is in place. The stone is sealed, which means they've secured it in such a way that it cannot be easily moved. It's pretty much locked in place. They have people on guard, watching to see if anyone's going to come and try to move the stone, and they think they've got everything covered. There's just one problem. God is in charge, and he's not finished fulfilling his promises concerning Messiah.